yourself knifing the blade in and having no control over your pull. So it is a very common problem to deal with in a boat, and it commonly gets screwed up after somebody catches a crab. Somebody catches a crab and you're going along pretty fast. What happens to that oar? It whips around, it swings up, it puts a lot of torque on the pin, and the settings get twisted and wrenched. The backstay becomes bent and bowed, and the setting that was there may not be reliable to trust again. So this is important. You want to be able to say, wait a minute, that looks good, that doesn't look good. I need to change this, I don't need to change this. And we'll go over how to adjust that. All right?
You'll go over how to measure it as well.
Yeah, to a degree. A lot of this, unfortunately, is kind of eyeballing.
Okay.
There are some measurement tools that we can use. They're not highly accurate. Honestly, if you have an eye for building things, and if you can tell if something's straight and vertical, that is pretty much good enough. Because there is other components involved. The collar on the oars sometimes lose a little bit of their glue. Say they get really, really hot, glue gets soft, maybe it gets twisted a little bit. The pitch on the oar can also be off. That makes it so that your rigger could be fine, but your oar and the blade itself has a problem. That's a little more complicated to fix. It can be fixed, but it is a more labor-intensive process, which I can go over and explain to you. Part of just like housekeeping, the goal here is so that I can give you guys some extra knowledge so that you can be responsible to maintain these boats.
Or see where there's a problem.
Or see where there's something, and if you can't figure out, you need to escalate and find somebody and be part of the process to help fix it. All right? I think that's a responsibility of being a member of the club, because we don't pay anybody to do this. We all have to take care of it ourselves. So then you have your seat. All right? It's the right way to put a seat into a boat. There's a wrong way to put the seat into the boat, i.e. backwards or forwards. You can jam it. There's easy ways to slide them in, and there's difficult ways. And we don't want to be forcing you. So I'll show you guys how to take the seats in and out of the tracks. I'll show you the parts to check on the tracks to adjust the slides. Another common rigging problem that people run into is hitting front stops, hitting back stops. The tracks themselves are adjustable with about 7 or 8 inches of travel. Very few people, the tallest to the shortest of us, have a difference in height of legs of 7 or 8 inches. Usually the height comes from our torso, not from our leg length. So even as tall as Helen is to as short as Sharon, your leg length isn't going to be a huge bit difference. So we can find these sweet spots on adjusting the tracks so that generally people don't hit the front stops or back stops. Or if you happen to be at the extreme, the simple adjustment to take to go out and still have a comfortable run. The other thing is the foot stretchers themselves. All right, we spend a lot of time moving them forward and backwards. Okay, why you move them forward or backwards is very important to how the boat rows. Okay. There's many different methods on how to pick your foot stretcher location, and I think you guys should all be aware of the changes that happen when you move the foot stretchers towards the stern or towards the back. So just to get a base of what we have an idea of. Does anybody have a clue why they would move them towards the stern? Right?
Sorry.
No?
Leave them where they're at. Distribution?
That is a good one. Yes. Helen?
Well, 2 things. So you don't hit the front stops on
Yep.
and your hips are in the right spot.
Yes.
Because you want your hips to be aligned with the pin, right?
The pin.
Bingo. So when we look at the boat, there is a pin. If we're talking sweeping or sculling, we're working around the pin. All right, and so the pin is fixed in a location, and I move my whole body around it and then through it. If I move my foot stretchers farther towards the stern, I'm going to make it easier to work on the front side of that pin. If I move my foot stretchers towards the bow, I'm working much more on the back side of the pin. All right? So the effect there when you're sweeping is if I move the oarlock forward towards, not the oarlock, the foot stretchers sternward, the oar itself is going to come farther and farther into my body. If I move it backward, the oar is going to slide across my body as I move closer to this bow of the boat. Everybody follow me conceptually here? All right. Benefits of moving it so that you're more sternward and so that the oar is tighter and you have less backhand angle is the angles that the oar travels through from the catch to the finish. If that is aired more towards the bow, you can generate more acceleration. From the top corner to the perpendicular of the hull, you generate the most amount of leverage that can propel the boat. Once you pass the pin and you start working in on the boat, it's very difficult to generate acceleration that moves the boat. So we always, in general, want to err towards the side of getting more extreme catch angles, and we want to deal with what's the most comfortable finish angle that allows me to have room to move my hands up, down, and away. If I move my feet all the way to the stern, chances are when I sit back, stops at the finish, I don't have the ability to come in and out of my body very easily, and I get caught on my shirt, or like it comes in at an angle that's off center of my body, which is difficult to manipulate. So finding that sweet spot is the key, and that's the main reason why you move your foot stretchers, is to make it comfortable, air towards the side of getting more catch angle, and air towards the side of being comfortable with your turn. All right, any questions there? Yes.
So the general rule of thumb is you want to put your foot stretchers so that your hip is parallel to the pin, right? You said that earlier. Is that correct or no?
At what point of the stroke are you talking about?
At the, I don't know.
The catch.
Here we go.
Because we're moving forward and backwards, so it's all about defining where are you thinking about, like where I want to be
So
relative
it's
to
at the
the
catch where you're.
When I'm at the catch, I want my hip bone to be maybe 2 inches sternward of the pin.
In
front, towards the floor.
so 2 inches in. Okay, 4. Okay.
Sternward.
Okay.
And so, like, one very common problem that people run into is positioning their hips that far forward
Yeah.
into the boat results in front stop smacking.
Right.
Yeah.
Which,
That's what I was doing.
so visually, the first thing to check is standing perpendicular to the hull, the location of front stops to the location of her pin. If you just let the seats slide forward, are there any of these boats guts up? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the North Country over there has its guts up. So if you take a look at any of those seats, all right, you can see the ribs, all right. Are you okay, Sue? Are fully forward at their end of travel near front stop. Everybody can see that?
Yeah.
Everybody can see the rib that's they're closest to, the middle rib of each seat.
Yes.
Notice how the back wheel is almost in line with the center of that rib.
Mm-hmm.
That rib is in line with the center of the pin.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So those seats are set up so that front stops is going to have you about 5 inches in front of the pin. So if you position your foot stretchers so that you very gently graze front stops in that boat, you will be getting the optimum catch angle that you can
cool.
reach for.
I don't think I was ever.
Okay,
So that has
is it
to do-
perpendicular when we're 2 inches ahead of the?
That has to do with a number of factors. One factor is the amount of hip flexibility you possess. So if you don't have very good hip flexibility, you're not going to be able to compress that far
Okay.
where your shins become vertical. Say you have incredibly good hip flexibility, you can very easily over-compress past that.
Right.
And you do that, typically the sensation is your heels start lifting up off the foot plate. The moment your heels start coming off the bottom of the foot plate, you will be passing or starting to approach passing vertical shins.
Okay.
All right? So in terms of adjusting this, moving your foot stretchers towards the stern or towards the bow has absolutely nothing to do with your ability to create that angle of your shin. All it's doing is creating the location that you pivot around.
Gotcha.
If you run into the limitation of front stops, on the other hand, right? Say you have incredible range of movement, of flexibility, moving those foot stretchers so that you avoid front stops might allow it so that you can get to that better catch position. But looking at that boat, if the front stop location is also the location that you want to be for the right catch angle, you don't need to worry about it. Right? Does that make, am I still making sense?
Yeah, can I interject?
Yes, yeah.
Well, for many of us, older folk especially, so you would set it up, and go out, and then once you get warmed up, you're gonna be.
You get more and more.
Yeah,
range
you
of
get more
movement,
flexible.
You get more flexible as we row. The other thing is when you sit in the boat, not under motion, there's no momentum. So you can't use the momentum to help you compress.
Yeah.
So if you check your front stops when you're stationary, those may not be the same front stops when you're under motion, because that momentum of the whole crew behind you pushes you into the stern and gets you more catch angle. All right, so what else?
Well,
Yes.
you said something before that got my attention, and that is that if you are not sure about that hip being opposite the pin, and you err on the side of caution, you would come forward a little bit because you're getting more power at the catch, which again reminds us that it's really legs. Once you get back here, it's not as important as getting forward and getting that jump at the,
Yes.
for lack of a better word, jump at the catch.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, so another thing that we can look at, you can see some of the backstays are bent.
Yeah.
And that's the result of catching
Oh, yeah,
crabs.
I can see those,
And
yeah.
usually where that
In our
bend
lives.
happens.
See, the one they just flipped over,
Up
the
near the
first
top.
backstay on the left is bent. I can see that. See that?
Closer, yeah.
Okay.
The first
Well, which one do you want to look at?
The first one on the left.
They're all bent.
First one on the left is bent.
Exactly.
These two right here, they're both
What do we
bent.
do? What do we do? Well, one, it could be bent and it could be set up properly, right? Say it's bent right now and somebody goes and sets it up right. Oh, well, I'm going to assume it's right, all right? But say I go out and somebody catches a crab in the boat while I'm out there. You guys need to, when you put the boat in, check it and say, wait a minute, is this something that needs to be addressed? And take the time then to address it, all right?
So like you would actually want to look at if it's affecting the pitch,
Mhm.
would be the best indicator.
Absolutely. So, yes.
So the pin
So-
is important with that, make sure your pin when you get into the boat
It's
is.
straight up.
It's
and
straight
down.
up-
But can I also-
or the pin wants to be straight up and down, and then the oar lock itself has built-in angle to it. So the ideal angle that is commonly accepted is 4 degrees. So 4 degrees of forward pitch in conjunction with the general shape of the oars allows the blades to ride and float at the proper height when you put leverage on them. Yes, ma'am?
Can I make a suggestion then
Yeah.
for everybody to spread the word that if you go out in a boat and somebody catches a crab, that when you come back in, check it, but also write in the logbook what seat had a crab.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of work. I mean, I think it's more of like if you guys can look at it, take the time to figure out how to take care of it, and what's the simplest way to make it not be a problem anymore. That's all. We don't.
So
need
how
to-
do you fix the pitch then?
That's what we'll talk about.
Well, then you could put a twist tie little thing, if you've got something.
What I don't want to have is we don't want to avoid responsibility of fixing the problem.
You don't want to pass the buck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't have enough people who are
Right.
willing to step in and do this. We need to get more people who are helping out and maintaining these things.
Well, then maybe what I should say is okay, we caught a crab. I
Yeah.
looked at it. It looks okay.
Yeah.
I looked at it. I tried to fix it.
Right.
Yeah, then
But
we go
just
talk to
FYI.
somebody. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
fine. And it's, you know what, here's the reality. If you guys start messing around with these things and we end up making them worse, I don't care. I'm happy with you guys experimenting and figuring out yourself.
So then we can come
Part
to
of-
you and say, I screwed it up.
Absolutely. Part of all of this is mistakes, and that's how you learn to get a better grasp on how to maintain these things properly. So just other common housekeeping things. The foot stretchers. So all the foot stretchers there's these layers to them. You have the shoe, you have a foot plate, you have a footboard, and then you have a crossbar, all right? And then you have the notches that it all attaches onto, all right? There's a couple of things that we want to be aware of so that the foot stretchers are being properly maintained. One, the plugs. So the plugs are the bits of plastic that are attached to the end of the crossbar, and they have grooves, and they drop into the groove. When people carelessly move their foot stretchers forward and backwards, the plugs get stripped and worn, and then they won't engage with those notches, meaning when you drive and you have some real power, boom, they're sliding. They need to be replaced. They are plastic. A lot of them have metal grooves on the attached to the boat, and the plugs themselves are plastic so that they're replaceable when they do wear out. All right. The other part of the foot stretcher that's really important is the screws that attach the shoe to the foot plate. All right. So there's a couple of like back and forths here that happen. The shoe goes to the foot plate goes to the footboard. All right. Those screws sometimes work themselves loose, and you need to take off the foot plate, retighten them, and to make sure that because if they get loose, boom, your shoe pops off. Oh, that sucks. Yeah. You don't want that to happen when you're out on the water. So we'll go over how to look at that and how to fix it. They're very it's easy to do once you know how to do it. And then another little bit of information for you guys is that foot plate has holes that can raise and lower, all right? And generally they're set right smack dab in the middle, but you can raise them and lower them, and there's a benefit to that, just like here on the EARCs. So if we were talking about shin angle before, and so if I'm here, all right, so here you can see, without shoes on, relatively speaking, I'm very, very low. When I come forward...
Low relative to what?
Relative to my hip. My ankle ends up being really low because I don't have any height on my feet. So my hip is relatively high when my foot stretchers are here. And I come forward, my foot is straight down flat. And I'm not lifting up. Boom, I lift up, and you can see I'm starting to get catch angle.
Yeah.
All right? If I go down even more, I'm relieving this angle when I come forward into the catch, and it's even easier to get that forward catch.
So you want to lower that?
If I go lower, because my ankle and my hip starts to get height apart from each other, folding forward into my body becomes an easier thing to do, especially if I have a little extra around the stomach. Conversely, I go way high up on the extreme because I think I have little feet. All of a sudden, I can't come forward.
All right.
And that has to do with the ankle height and my hip height.
So fixing that on the EARC is one thing.
It's very simple, easy to do. On the water, it's more difficult. So there's a lot of components on the water. There's the shoes that are in the boat. How large are they? If they're size 15s, chances are you're pretty much down low. So the one thing I look at is where the heel cup is and the bottom of the hull. How much room do I have there? And the easy thing for people to do, which has commonly been done at the club, is to get little foam inserts that you put on the bottom of your heel. And that makes it so that you're more snug in the shoes. But what that's mostly doing is raising your feet to maybe too high in the boat.
So what's the optimal placement of the feet then, Frank?
I think it comes down to a lot of components. One of them being your flexibility and your ability to fold into this position with forward body angle. Ideally, if you pop up off of here and there becomes more of a gap, and the tighter that angle gets closed, I can't open my leg up with too much force. If I'm locked down like this, I can use my whole foot, and my quad is in a better position to leverage and open up my knee. So raising them too high or raising them higher makes it so that your knee joint can work in a more powerful position, but it shortens your range of movement. So there's a compromise here in how you need to figure out what's the best for me. A lot of this is experimenting with, wait a
Just
minute.
seeing that big frame,
Yeah.
you keep your feet too high, you're gonna blow out your knees.
You could, yeah. So depending on how strong your knee joint is and how much range of movement you can have here, you can definitely hurt your knee. I would say though, to caveat that, rowing is a relatively soft sport on the knee. It builds up, compounds in the wheels, and makes these rutted deeper, and they go. I'm looking at this track. This should be replaced. This is kind of too worn, and you can see there's the original aluminum anodizing, and then it's created a groove, and it's worn a wear in here. See, there's notches here. All right. So if we make sure that there's no grit, and we take a wet cloth and we wipe them clean after the row, they're going to degrade much slower, and we're going to be able to maintain the integrity of the track. All right. Taking the seat on and off. Right? This is a double action seat. These are the easiest to take on and off a boat.
What makes it double action?
Watch, there's a carriage underneath, and it moves
carriage.
as I move forward and backwards. All right? These are the old design. I prefer them because they have less moving parts, and they hold up and they don't wear nearly as slowly. There's no bearings, and the wheels themselves are attached on a solid axle, so they don't degrade. They're heavier, so the whole rowing community has moved away from them from racing. To take a double action seat off, you bring it to the front stops, and you take the carriage and you slide it all the way to the front.
Just like that.
And incredibly effortlessly, it pops off.
Magician.
All right. Conversely, to put it back on, I slide the carriage the other way. All right. I find where the hooks start to engage with this bottom rail here, and I bump.
Nice.
It's all.
That wheel's off. Or
There you go.
now. I didn't hit the. There it goes. There it is. Now it's off. All right.
Flange.
So when I take this off, you look at the bottom here. You see this hook?
Oh yeah.
That hook has to go underneath this flange, and that's what keeps the seats from falling out with the boat upside down. All right?
Yeah.
So we take a look, you can see there's embedded aluminum all on these, and if this was cleaned really well, it wouldn't have that. All right? This whole boat, it's not properly maintained very well. All right. All right. The single action seats don't have that carriage effect. All right. These have bearings. Little
So this is a single
ball
action seat?
bearings inside of these wheels. They get corroded, rusted, they get crunchy, and they need to be replaced. All right.
The wheels freeze.
Yes. So again, I bring it up to the front. I ride the wheel up on the top, and I just gently bump it, and it pops right out, nice and easy.
Those seem like they would come out easier during the row.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we want to make sure that we're not smashing front stops hard when we're rowing, because it can derail itself. All right.
Has anyone had that happen during a race?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So these seats, we need to check the bearings. All right.
How do you check the
You
bearings?
check the bearings by wiggling the wheel and side loading it and feeling if there's any grit and problem in it. All right. So I'm holding onto it, I'm rotating it, and I'm side loading the bearing. All right. If you feel that there's crustiness in there, the wheel needs to be taken off and replaced. There's a Allen key right there. They pop off, and new wheel goes right back on. All right.
Do you have any wheels?
We do have some wheels. Again, this is part of, we don't have a whole lot of spare equipment, so a lot of this stuff is kind of just like Jimmy together, when we start getting a little more money, I'd like to have a bigger inventory of spare parts. And if everybody knows where they are and how to put them on, all we got to do is keep refilling the spare parts as needed. All right.
Why does this boat have two different designs then?
Because of legacy, things get broken, and then like so those seats would have been original. This carriage would have broken at one point, or it got misplaced, so it got replaced with this one.
Got it.
All right. Not all seats are interchangeable on all boats because of the width of these tracks varies depending on the boat. In general, the newer boats have wider spacing of tracks, which allows for wider seat carriages, and that's good because these 2 points get out of the way of our calves. And when we're hitting at backstops, we don't get track bite when we have wider tracks. The width of these tracks are determined by the spacing of the ribs. All right, so when we row in a boat that has ribs, the tracks are narrower, we're more likely to get track bite.
This is the rib?
That's a rib. Yes. All right. So we talked about positioning of the seat and how we want to make sure that we're a couple of inches. Our hip bone is 1 to 2 inches. Right here are the seat dimples that your butt goes in. It's a little bit farther forward of the pin, so we're going to be able to get nice catch angle. If we're coming very, very close to front stops, we can have the catch. Not even. Yeah. All right. So the way that we fix that is there's little wing nuts underneath. All right, so you got to get to them from the porthole. All right, so there's one wing nut right here. There's one wing nut right here. All right, those get loosened very gently. All right, they get loosened, and then you can wiggle this track forward and backwards.
Okay.
A little bit. All right. They're very hard to reach. You need to have small forearms and long fingers. When you're adjusting these, it's very important that you don't thread the wing nut all the way off the post. It is really hard to get it back on. Yes. All right, really hard to get it back on when it is. So you just want to thread it up so it's loose enough, and then you can slide the track forward and backward. All right. The other important thing to note while we're looking at these tracks is there's a wedge. All right. Notice how there's a wedge underneath the track.
Okay. Oh yeah.
All right. Why that's there?
So the other thing can go under.
Does anybody have any ideas why the wedge is there?
The wood that the tracks are sitting on?
Yes.
That is,
Tell us that
And-
one. I don't know.
yeah, and it's angled. Yeah.
It has an angle to it. It has an angle to it.
And more narrow forward.
So while we're sitting in the boat, right? If we're all sitting at the stern or at the backstops, if we're all sitting at the backstops, the boat is going to find its own level. When we all sit onto the front stops, the boat is going to find a different level because the center of gravity of the entire mass is going from a little bit to the bow to a little bit to the stern, and the whole boat creates a porpoise. It's gonna tilt this way and this way, depending if we're all sitting at front stops or if we're all sitting at back stops. This wedge is in place to maintain your height relative to the pin to be consistent. If this wedge is not there, you're gonna feel like you're falling backwards.
Okay.
All right? Because when you all sit at backstops, the whole bow sinks down.
Right.
All right? And it makes you feel like as it comes up, you're comfortable. So that wedge is really important that it's there. We want to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. They don't usually go anywhere, but it's there. All right. So we'll just take this up and move on to the foot stretchers here. So notice we got metal, right? These grooves.
I love the metal.
This is
So
the
much
plastic
easier
you were
to
talking
adjust.
about.
Then the plastic plugs are right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never noticed they were
It's like
plastic.
the bolty thing.
Okay.
So here we go. Look at that.
Oh, those are plastic.
That's a surprise. There's absolutely no teeth left on these plugs. All right.
Oh my God.
So where are they inside? You want me to go get two right now?
I
don't think
we don't
I
need
have
this cold.
those.
So do we have replacement?
We do have some replacement plugs. They should be inside of the that big.
Oh, that's why they call them plugs, because they plug them right in there.
Wow.
My goodness.
You get a sometimes you need an adjustable wrench and you just wiggle it side to side, and then we can replace these. The angle of this is also adjustable.
Yes, it spins that way.
So if you notice right here,
There they are.
this and this are our two mounting points.
Yeah.
All right. If we make this distance greater by sliding this one direction on this setup,
Yeah.
right? You're making your foot stretchers. You're changing the angle of your foot plate. All right. So if you increase the spacing from here to here, you're changing the angle of your foot plate, and you're making your foot stretchers flatter. All right. If the foot stretcher is flatter, it's much easier to fold into the couch. But you also get this feeling of lifting straight up out of your foot plate, and you can't go horizontal. So if you go this way too far, you feel like I can't compress into the stern. But you get this really nice leverage, and you got really good purchase to create force that way. The common accepted angle is 42.5 degrees, which is,
about right.
should be set up. All right. There are some limitations that people run into. Is ankle flexibility makes it so that you may want to adjust this one way or the other. Say if you have really tight Achilles tendons, or if you have a fused ankle,
That's why Joe's not rowing anymore.
you can't.
His ankle.
Yes.
He's got a fused thing.
So if you flatten out the foot stretcher angle, you can accommodate that angle flexion, and you can make it much more comfortable to row. That is a really nice thing about rowing a boat, which we do not get to do on the EARC. And that makes, all right. You can see here. There's the footboard. There's the foot plate. All right. I'm not going to bother taking this off because I don't know if I'll get it back on. No, wait. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Wow. Okay.
It should be fine.
That one needs fixing
Why are the
anyway.
shoes so tiny in that seat?
What do you mean tiny? The size of the shoe?
Yeah.
This is what we had laying around, and somebody put it back in. If we had the money to uniformly put one size shoe in all the boats, that would be great. But we all don't
what
have.
size would we choose?
Exactly.
11?
Yeah.
It doesn't really work. So there is another system that potentially can be created for the boathouse. It is financially out of reach right now.
The adjustable shoes.
They're not adjustable shoes. It's called the Bat Logic system, and the shoes themselves clip in and clip out, and everybody could purchase their own shoe, and it can clip right in. Exactly. The problem is it's about $200 per seat when we invest in everything all together.
And how many seats do we have as a club?
A
lot.
couple, probably 200.
Okay.
So
It's
some people,
a
like John bought his own shoes because he's a size 13.
exactly. All right,
Right,
so
Because it was
I just wear another pair of shoes and
well,
slide
right.
them in the
It's
big ones.
easier for us, but he
Yeah.
couldn't get them
So-
made big.
what I just did there is I took those three wing nuts off. All right, and let's just notice some of the things that are happening. That we can move this up or down the foot plate. Remember what I was talking about?
Yeah.
The heel and the bottom of the hull. So right now, if the heel is down, and if I put my finger here, I'm pretty much at the bottom of the hull. I can't get these heels much lower in the boat, so that's where they are. I like them like that. This is probably going to make it more comfortable for most people who row, and we pay attention to this heel height and the top of the seat. All right, if that looks to be appropriate, we're good. Again, if we flatten out this angle, notice that heel starts coming higher and higher, and that also makes it so that your angle there starts getting fine. So there's only so much movement we can do. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this foot plate off, and that reveals the screws. Oh, look at that. There's a problem already. So can you hand me my screwdriver down there? We have 4 screws here holding the shoes.
One is loose.
And one is loose, or it may be solidly corroded. It might be stripped. It may not be able to be tightened anymore. Looks like it's been messed with. It is completely loose. All right. So if I take my shoe here and I give it a wiggle, you don't really notice it, but that one, the other three are tight. That one is loose. All right. Every once in a while, if you guys have the time and you guys are rowing a boat regularly, take the foot plates off the footboards and check these.
We should do
four.
one boat at a time. Like if we just said one boat a week, everything comes out.
I think the best way to do this is you get a small group of people together. You say, all right, this boat I've been rowing, I want to go over and check this and go take the initiative and look at it.
I'm down with that. That
All right.
sounds
Yeah.
This is
like a good
while
idea.
So that wasn't stripped then, you just.
it wasn't stripped. All I need to
just
do is
loose.
snug it up. It
What
gets,
do you do if it is stripped? Just get a new.
you get a new one. So it could be stripped from the shoe, or it could be. It's most likely. And the other thing that happens is they get rusted, and the threaded rods that are embedded in the shoe start to just get loose.
Okay, so that was my question. So these are special shoes that have threads in them for these.
This is
And
this
are
is
they
the
all the
newer
same?
design. They're not all the same. There are a lot of variations between shoe patterns and footplate patterns. So if you notice, these four holes have a very particular relationship to each other.
Yeah.
So they're wider, they're narrower, and that's to allow the proper angle of your feet and splay when you're moving. If your feet are perfectly parallel or they're slightly splayed, one is a little more comfortable to row with. If I have my feet slightly splayed, I can move a little bit more comfortably. If I move my feet very parallel and I'm in a narrow stance, it feels a little less stable.
Right.
So that slight amount of splay is necessary. You can get into trouble because similar shoe patterns and you can make them fit, and you start playing with that splay, and you can start getting things into a funky situation. Or if, say, you put these on upside down, and if you just like jam them in there to make them work, or as you start re-drilling holes, you start messing with that splay, and it becomes less comfortable. And they actually allow you to change that splay location or the width of the shoes themselves, so that you could better accommodate your own personal hip width.
Because we all have different hip widths.
Exactly.
Okay,
All right. So these are tight. These shoes aren't going to come off of the foot plate. The other thing that we really need to pay attention to is that these ties are locked in. All right. If you're rowing a boat that does not have heel ties locked, if you flip, you are risking your life. What happens, these heel ties are positioned so that when you start to raise up, that your heel naturally slips right out, and then you can be released from the boat. If there's no heel tie here, and this has happened before heel ties were made a rule, people flip over, and this it flexes right here, and you will drown. All right, so these are very important, that they're secure and that they're strong enough that they're going to be able to take the force of when somebody flips.
So when you're in a race, they come off and
They will
check
not let you
that
race
if the
if
heel
these
ties
are
proper.
not properly adjusted. The proper adjustment is, say, about 3 fingers.
Oh,
All right.
good to know.
So if you have 3 fingers of lift between the heel, you're in good shape. Just make sure they're tied. We don't want any silly accidents happening. All right, so we confirmed that this foot stretcher position puts it so that the heel is very close to the bottom of the hull, which is the lowest it can go. We can still raise it up if we wanted to. There's no need to raise it up. We're not trying. We want this to be comfortable for people to row in, so we're going to leave it like it is. But I could pick them all the way up to the top if I really wanted to. All right.
And that would make it
And that's
more
gonna,
of an angle.
well, it's not changing the angle. What it's doing is it's changing the height of your foot stretcher, which makes it more or less comfortable to come forward into the catch. We're starting off with a position that's as low as can be, so we're hedging our bets that this is going to work.
Inside look pretty trash.
Yes. All right. So that's another thing we look at right there. So
Lots of
yeah,
stuff.
come on in
Just
closer.
a little mangled.
If anybody has any questions on stuff,
The other thing that's super hard, if
Yeah.
you're adjusting this stuff at a race, like he said, not to take the wing nut all the way off.
Yeah.
Because I've had things where you come and then this is like a T, bolt and you can't get it back in. It's like,
You get all flustered and
it's race
scared.
time and we lost that. We got to find another T bolt. So yeah, just loosen.
So
Don't take
I've got
the
these
nuts
all
off.
hand tight. Those bolts go into screws right there. So sometimes the threads on these rods, you can't get it hand tight, so you need a screwdriver and a wing nut to get it perfectly tight. When I put this back on, I usually line up this hole first because this is the easiest to slide forward or backwards. Let's see, there. There. All right, so that's good there. If I'm going to adjust this foot stretcher and I'm going to move it forward to the stern or to the bow, like Dee was saying, I usually don't take the threads off all the way, but I loosen them almost to the end of the post. So I usually adjust it to be about right there. Everybody can see that height. So the top of the bolt is right flush with the bottom of the wing nut there. That allows me to lift this up. And now I can slide the whole thing forward or backwards, hopefully freely. And what I'm not doing is I'm not rubbing the plugs and stripping the plugs on these grooves. All right? We've already confirmed these plugs are garbage. So the only thing holding this in place is the friction that you tighten this down with.
All right. Lubricate the tracks?
Lubricate this?
No, the track.
This.
These.
This.
Yeah.
No, we don't
Lube
we don't
anything.
want this to move once it's tightened down.
Right. Right. But it'll be easier to move if
Yeah,
If
so
it was
then once
lubricated.
you're pressing
But if
it,
you
let
so
go.
so again if you loosen this all the way to the end of the post, I can lift it high enough so that it should wiggle. This is kind of a two-handed operation, and it's a little
You
wiggling.
gotta baby it from the bottom.
Yeah, finding the best way.
Best part is to take it up from the bottom, like you're saying.
At the top and the bottom using
Yeah.
two hands, because the bolts will cam and jam themselves and lock it in place, and then what you find people doing is just pushing it really hard. It's not worth it. Just lift it, find a nice spot that you like, all right, and then go with it. So if I'm moving these again, I'm looking at the front stops, right? I know I've already confirmed my front stop location is in a nice spot for the pin. Now I want to make sure that my feet are in a position so that my front stops are really good. I know for me, about a fist between the back of the heel and the front of the front stop is a nice position to be in for my catch angle. So I look at the bottom of the foot stretcher, and if I'm adjusting this boat for myself, I'm going to put these shoes right around here.
Interesting. When it's at the front stop. Yeah, so lengthwise.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the bottom of the heel and the front of the front stop, because I know when I come into the catch, that's kind of where. Now, I over compress, so that's a function that I do. But this also gives me the room so that I know, all right, I'm not going to hit front stops hard. And you notice I'm 5'11", almost 6 foot, and in this boat I'd be putting my feet right around. The height,
that's
the
something I
height
learned from
of your
Frank, too. I
body
move them all
is
further back.
not where you don't put this in one place so that I'm taller, I'm here, I'm shorter, I'm here. No. You put it so that you're messing with this distance here. This distance, if we're gonna move it towards the stern, this is when I'm in this position, I can get nice twist and get catch angle here. That's gonna help you move and twist around the pin. Okay?
So I kind of want to go out and do it. Once we're a team,
But so here's the thing, right? On this boat, on this seat right here, these are small shoes.
Right.
Those shoes are big. Look at the difference on where the heel is. It's not that much farther towards the stern, but the shoes are all the way almost to the end of the tracks. Right? So you have to look at everything and think about, wait a minute, there's more components into this than just simply, I'm only looking at this distance.
So the key distance you're looking at is actually here,
Yes, absolutely.
not
Not
here.
there. This I don't really care about. I care about this because this affects my catch angle.
Okay.
All right.
There we go. Now.
The other thing that you're going to run into is if this distance, if you need to get relief from track bite.
Yeah.
Raising
I'm sorry, relief from
track bite. Oh, so if your calves are getting hammered down into the tracks, you take the foot plate and you raise the foot plate. And that's going to change the angle of your leg as it comes up to the seat, and it's going to make it more comfortable so that you don't gouge out the backs of your calves. Right? The compromise there is you're growing with higher feet, which makes it harder to compress. All that stuff. It's a catch-22 on all this. But don't get track bite. That's better. All right.
I know.
We can talk more. Are we? It's 10 o'clock already. We've been doing this for an hour. All right.
We need phase 2.
We can do this again another day.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So, Deb,
So you know
we'll
what?
put together
I'll put another day.
Is we all love this old style.
Yes.
And the plastic new alligators are much harder to adjust properly.
Especially with
and
the
get-
cams.
And get eaten up much harder and often get misaligned. And when you get misaligned, that's when it comes off. So you have to even be more babyish with the plastic alligator tracks.
What about on the next class that we actually fix one of the boats?
Yeah,
That way we learn really how to do it.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
a good
way
idea.
you're
flip over
making
a
sure.
bench wall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you know,
There's
well, that's it, because then you
lot of
learn by
stuff to
doing.
talk about.
besides-
All right. There's like we can do this every week, and I'll still have more things to come up with. So
But it's
like,
good that you're focusing on the actual position when we row.
How it affects us, yeah.
that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Like, this is all about. Like, you got to
figure
get
out
into
how
a
to
boat.
fix
You got to
these
find out
things.
how to make it comfortable so that you have a good time. All right.
Okay.
Some of the things we didn't talk about is height. All right.
Oh, yeah.
This you can't move on this boat. You're stuck with this. All right.
No clips.
Height.
Boats that have clips, right?
Why you move your height up or down is dependent on a lot of factors. Why don't we put this
Yeah, let's
back on the low boys, and we could talk more upstairs if we want to, or we could call it quits.
Well, we can finish that out because that's.
I have set up all of the riggers to be identical heights. Now somebody comes in and starts playing with those heights. What they're doing is they're changing the balance of the boat. So instead of having the oarlocks balanced straight across on level, now you're creating a pendulum that's slower than the other, and the boat starts behaving horizontally in some rather unpredictable,
Right?
unpredictable manners. All right, and you can be pushing your hands really far down, and I'm saying, oh, I'm down on port, but you're actually down on starboard because the height is all screwy. So from a starting point, when we look at these boats, ideally all oarlocks are exactly the same height. That makes it so that you guys, when you're in the boat and you're playing with the set, you can properly predict and adjust. Once you start changing that height, the amount of travel that one person has to another person becomes different, right? So if my oarlock is low on this side and high on this side, I can't fall as far onto port side, so I feel like port side is always riding down. But the reality is if they had been brought into level, the amount of travel that happens on port and the amount of travel that happens on starboard is symmetrical. So we have the same frame of reference on both sides, which makes it much easier to work together.
Short answer is don't mess with the clips.
That's the short answer.
Adjust your feet instead of the clips.
But I find a lot of people do. I think
Well, yeah.
I saw a lot of people do that last summer.
We always want them to be the
What to
same.
do with
But
it.
some
Never touched
people
them.
who
Yes.
are
So
like,
Frank, if we do need to adjust the clips, it should be in pairs.
Yeah, ideally both port and starboard. So here's another component of why.
Because you get somebody in, it's like this, it's like this, I can't go like this.
So here's the other thing going on in a boat. All right, all boats have designed weights to be rowed at. All right, so if I have a boat that has the ideal crew weight, the loaded weight is 200 pounds per person, and I put in that boat people who weigh 150 pounds, everybody. Well, the entire system is going to sit really high up out of the water. What did I do right there? My angle, my oarlock height just dramatically rise, and that slope becomes really, really high. And you have this feeling of I'm pulling into my chin.
Yeah.
That's not a problem of the oarlock height. That's a problem of picking the wrong boat to row because you're rowing in an oversized hull.
But why would you choose to do that?
There's a number, there's a couple of reasons. Yeah, it's convenient. You pick a boat that's convenient. But you should be aware of the ideal weight of that hull before you row it, because these are problems that you could avoid, and it can be part of your process of I should row this boat, I should row that boat, if there's a choice. You always want to be rowing a boat that is most closely to the ideal rowing weight. Yes?
So just so in case the group doesn't know, I need to adjust it, but I have created a board that we're going to put downstairs that actually has each boat where it is in the rack and what weight class it is.
Oh, awesome, thank you.
So it should help with the choosing the boat this year.
Further to elaborate on that point of hull size, rowing conditions. Like ideally, rowing is done on flat water. Unfortunately, we row on a lake that has motorboat traffic that is also relatively large and has high seawalls. So what that means is when wakes are created, which happens from wind and from motorboat traffic, they continue to reverberate on the lake and continue to be persistent. So there's more up and down water than there is flat water, which means having a boat that has more freeboard makes it so that I can let this thing tip more and feel like I'm not gonna get splashed, I'm not gonna have to ride on the water. So there is a very legitimate reason to row a boat that is too big if the water is looking like it may be rough.
Okay.
You can have a much more enjoyable row, or even have a row out on the lake if you have a slightly heavier boat. With the understanding that your oar heights are possibly problematic, and so that is something to be aware of when you're taking things out. Also, if you row in boats that are too small, right? What's going to happen there? Your freeboard gets really low. So when there are waves, they're much more likely to break over the top of the gunwale wall. They're much more likely to smash into the rigger, get into the boat, potentially swamp you. So we want to be really aware that we're not taking out hulls that are too small. When we row hulls that are small, because we're lowering the center of gravity, we're also creating a scenario that's easier to row. Because your center of gravity is low, it's much more likely to be rock solid. So there is this tendency of comfort to take out boats that are undersized, and we feel like, oh, we're better for it. And the reverse is true. When you row in really big boats, because you have lots of tipping that will happen, these things feel really unpredictable and challenging. How many times have you guys had a really, really good row in the weapon?
Never?
It has happened. I've rowed that boat, and I've had amazing rows in that boat, but there's a lot of things that go into it to make that happen, all right? That boat is a 210-pound men's boat. You need to be really, really big to get that thing to sit at the right water height so that it's going to predict and respond properly. It's going to fall really, really fast. Whereas you take out the North Country, that's a 160-pound person boat. You're going to be sitting pretty low, and it's really not going to tip very quick, and it's easy to be like it's like rowing with training wheels on. The other thing that happens with hull shapes here is the curve of the bottom of the hull, all right? When you start looking at the bottoms of the hulls, some of them are flatter, and some of them are more radiused and more circular, all right? The more circular boat you have, the quicker you gotta go? The more circular your hull is, the quicker the gunwale walls are gonna fall, all right? The more flat it is, the slower they're gonna fall, all right?
So when picking a hull, looking at the skill level of the people you're rowing with, you may want to choose something that has a flatter bottom than something that has a tighter radius. But as you start to progress and your skills start to get better, having a tighter radius hull makes it a lot more fun because you can start playing with your handle heights and really adjusting that set. All right, so that's all talking about oar height. All right, to consolidate that, when you change oarlock height, you want to be changing it in pairs up and down. You want to be factoring in the size of your crew that you're rowing in and the size of the hull that you're taking out to make that adjustment appropriate. Now, where is all of this stuff supposed to land on your body? And if I'm sweeping, the end of my oar should come in right around my third rib, underneath my pec, all right? If I'm coming in lower, that's okay, because we're starting to also generate that more horizontal pull. But what we don't want to be doing is coming in higher. And if you look at what's happening to my body, when I'm coming in higher, look at the angle of my arm right here, all right? This is starting to become really, really tight. When I start coming in lower, look how that elbow opens up. What's happening there is the engagement of the lat starts to be able to be applied. If I'm coming in high, I'm using mostly bicep. Your biceps are not very strong. Your lats are really strong, all right? So we want to be pulling in to a lower plane where our elbows stay open, and that is powerful, all right? So we adjust the oarlock height so that our forearms can maintain a parallel plane to the gunwale wall, a parallel plane to the water surface. We also adjust our foot stretchers towards the bow to make that easier. If my foot stretchers are too far for the stern, I start crunching in to finish this way. That's what I was talking about. We start to not have enough room to maneuver the oar here. So we would move the foot stretchers forward or back to open up that arm. We might lower the rigger to make sure that that stays open, okay?
And the shoulders affect that too?
Your shoulders should always just be relaxed, but so like, in order to find that height, what I do is I let my arms swing down, and if I'm in a boat, I can't actually let my knuckles fall because the seat's there, but I let them fall, and I just swing my arms like this, and then I can find out, all right, my elbow is swinging like a pendulum from my shoulder here, and then I want to make sure that, okay, my outside arm is able to travel in that plane. All right. If I'm not able to swing like a pendulum with my arm freely with the oarlock, I'm going to be kind of scrunching things up and become uncomfortable. The other really nice thing about being able to swing in low is as you pull, the oar gets at the right height so that you can release the puddle. If you scrunch in high, and if you're holding on to the puddle and you're high, and you have layback, I can't drop this down. If I swing in low, all I have to do is feather the blade and it pops right out of the pocket. If I pull in up, I have to drop my hands in order to get my oar out of the pocket. That is really hard to do, and it's really problematic to set. Because if I'm creating a vertical force this way, that's not completely complementary to my opposite side, I'm dropping. If I can create a pull that comes in low because of my oarlock height is right, I can feather the blade out. I'm not creating a dropping force, but if I want to correct a drop in the set, I can move my hands. Very, very good control of the set there. Yes.
Yeah, I think what I saw once in a video is that if it's at the right height and you just have to move it up a little bit and then the water kicks it the rest of the way out.
You actually don't even need to change the oarlock height. If you're rowing with a properly rigged boat and you pull in to the right height, you can feather the blade and then return it back to square without changing height and be clear of the water's surface.
And the reason for that is hydrocarbon bonds. Water is sticky. And as you pull, you create a berm, a swell on the stern side of the oar. And you create a pocket on this side. And if you follow and you create that pendulum, you can rise that berm up to create height of the oar. And then I let go of tension. The water sticks to itself and falls down away from the pommel. And then boom, I can change the oar height. I can rotate the oar without creating all this. And all that has to do with is that natural pendulum swing. The height change from here to here is the dropping of the hands to create space to feather the blade. Does that make sense? All right, so all about adjusting to that so you can get that pendulum height swing is making sure that your angle of attack, that the oar is sloping into your body into the right place, which is right around the top, the bottom part of your pectoral muscle, underneath your boob, on your third rib right there. Or if I'm sweeping, I'm coming in and I'm coming in right to the floating ribs on my body. Okay. All right. That's oarlock height. Where do we want to go next?
Probably enough.
Huh?
I don't know if you already covered it, but I was wondering if you're going to get on the biggest reason people think their oarlock height is wrong is on the recovery.
They don't have room. They don't have
clearing their
room.
knees. No,
Yes.
Because on your recovery, people often do this and move. And
Yep. If you move your seat before you've established your forward body angle, you feel like I'm trapped and I'm low, and then you create this upward. You do this hump over your knees, and that's going to be driving on the water.
Right, it's very crucial to get your body forward before your knees.
So like the feeling that I get when I come from the finish and move forward to my forward body angle position is that my head is very high up over my hands, and I feel like I'm able to put my weight down low on my oar. If I feel like my oar is in front of my eyes, chances are I'm riding the oar on the water. If I'm above the oar and able to get my shoulder weight on top of the oar, my oar can lift off very comfortably and I can play with the height that way. But that's starting to get away from rigging and starting getting more into technical execution. But it is very, very important to understand that forward in front of the knees before we move is good. Rigging, gearing is one of them. So gearing is the ratio of your lever of your oar. That gear can be heavy, that gear can be light. If the gear is heavy, my drive phase is very, very slow. If the gear is light, my drive phase is fast. So I catch and I move the boat through the water. And if I have a light gear, I can move the boat through the water very, very easily. If I have a heavy gear, it feels really laborsome and really, really hard. All right. For masters rowing in general, we have light gearing because it's more gentle on our backs.
What is a gear?
The gear is the relationship of your oar length to your pin location.
Okay.
So if I'm heavy, it's a fulcrum.
Where the collar is.
Is it like some
So-
people call this inboard and outboard?
Yes,
Oh,
that's
wow.
the
You're
relationship.
adjusting the collar to change your gear.
Yeah,
I
here,
see.
this is
Okay.
so
Those are all preset for us, though, right?
you don't get a whole lot of adjustment unless you want to mess around with this. All right, this is something that they're doing downstairs.
Just saw the measuring.
Yeah, they're measuring things. So if I'm in the center, right, and if this is a fulcrum, if I put force on this, I'm getting very even force on the outside.
Yeah.
The amount of travel on one end is exactly the same as travel on the outside.
Yeah.
If I start sliding this way, the amount of travel I create on the inboard creates a lot of travel on the outboard. All right? So that is going to create how much the boat is going to move
under the drive face.
So is that a heavy gear or a light gear?
If I'm rowing like this,
Yeah.
I'm creating a very, very heavy gear. This is going to be a very slow drive,
Gotcha.
and it's going to be very, very difficult to generate momentum. But you're also going to generate a very long arc, and you're going to throw the boat really, really far. If you spend any time talking to Simon, one of our longest members of the club, he has a theory of the mile-long oar. So if you have a mile-long oar, you could complete a 2K race with one stroke. Right? So taking things to the extreme allows you to kind of understand, well, all right, if I move this gear this way, per stroke I take, I'm able to get more run. There's a niceness, there's a sweet spot to there, which comes down to individual limitations of physical ability and what people like. Do you want to have a more fast clip, or do you want to have a slower boom, boom? And that's a personal preference.
Which one did you say we have here?
In general, masters rowing is geared light. In the whole spectrum of rowing, we're geared relatively lightly. So like just for comparison's sake, senior team men's rowers racing 2,000 meters are generating about 400 watts to 450 watts per stroke. Women masters rowers for 1,000 meters are probably generating 180 watts per stroke, so less than half, and that's a massive difference in ability of strength. So like we don't need to gear the things as heavy as those people do if we want to row in the same style that they row. So like, because we're not physically capable of generating that same leverage and same acceleration, if we want to row with the same type of form, we need to make sure things are geared properly for us. So that's done by moving the pin in or out.
And the pin's what's the pin?
Is the oar lock.
Okay.
All right. So if I move my pin in
on the oar.
No. That's a different adjustment. This
That's
is
why
just
I'm asking.
the oar lock.
That's why I'm asking.
If I'm moving my pin in, I'm creating more travel on the outboard, and I'm generating more a heavier gear. If the other thing that I'm doing is, like, because the oar and the oar lock are separate things, if I just simply move the pin, I'm doing this, right? So that also affects where the oar comes in and out on my body, right? Depending on how tall I am, if I move the pin really far in, I end up making it possible to move my foot stretchers farther to the bow, which has some potential advantages or disadvantages. If I move my pin out, I can make it much easier to move my foot stretcher towards the catch and get better catch angles. All of that has to do with, like,
How do you move it?
How do you
it doesn't look like it would
move.
move.
You slide it in or out, and you measure it from the center line of the boat. So you need to know the width of the gunnel walls.
You won't be doing any of that.
And the center of the boat, and then the distance of the pin from there, and then that moves in or out.
Sharon, you said that's what they're doing downstairs.
It can, exactly.
No,
You can
they're just
telescope,
doing the collar.
inwards
The collar,
or outwards.
okay.
Yeah.
That one boat that we were just looking at
Yes,
earlier.
exactly. So in general, we're not playing with that stuff right now, but this is stuff
That's
that
if you've got
can be.
the same boat and customized.
Well, yes and no, but also, like, somebody catches a crab and wait a minute,
It
that
happens,
pin got
yes,
taken out of
yeah.
place.
Yeah.
We need to return it back to what is generally accepted.
At least we're aware of that now.
Yeah.
We're aware of that.
So also similarly, I would just say on average, you would want the collars, the inboard and outboard, to be the same, not adjusted per person, but per
Exactly,
boat.
yes,
Yeah.
you can adjust them per person.
Yeah, but just a
If
little
if you're in a situation where you row the same boat all the time, adjusting them per individual has some advantages.
Right.
Because you can accommodate for different physical benefits of the
People that
individual. So if you have a shorter person and you're giving them a heavier gear, you're going to allow them to effectively be in the drive phase for a longer amount of time. So if somebody who's tall can have a lighter gear and their drive time is matched, so they're both acting and accelerating the boat sympathetically. Whereas if you have somebody really short and somebody really tall with the same gear, that tall person is going to act on accelerating the boat for more time, which is problematic because then you start getting into catch timing and finish timing problems. So that is the method to create sympathy in the whole. So the adjusting that also, if I'm not moving the oar at the same time, all I'm doing is moving it this way or that way. If I'm moving the pin and the collar at the same time, I'm very much affecting the leverage. So you need to be aware of the adjustments that you're doing, all right? So typically, the inboard length on a sweep oar should be between 100 and, I believe it's 114 and 116 centimeters, with the span of that oar being about 86 centimeters from the center line, all right? If you start playing with that, like I think I rode with 84 span with 113 inboard when I was on the World Championship team, which is a very, very heavy gear. If I were to row that now, I would probably hurt my back and blow out a disc. I don't need to do that. So I'm gonna make things nice and light on myself, and I'm still gonna be able to get that clip. But effectively playing with making it heavier and moving that fulcrum more towards one side, my drive time is slowing down. Making it lighter, my drive time is getting faster. And this isn't an adjustment we do all the time, but if it does get screwy, you need to know, wait a minute, I need to check that. So how do you know if it's good or bad? In an 8, it's very easy to check. You stand at one end of the boat, past the bow or past the stern, you sidestep so that your eye is able to get straight in line with all the riggers. So if I'm looking at all port side, I should be able to stand in line and be able to make a straight line and sight a perfectly straight line of all of the oarlocks. All right? Those oarlocks need to be, boom, dead and straight. Where it starts to get funky, though, is the gunwale walls are not consistent widths.
Right.
The gunwale walls have a bow to them. So if I do that same thing and I look down the gunwale walls, there should be a curve. But if I off-center it and look down all the oarlocks, they should be dead straight. This is something to check regularly.
Okay.
All right? And the main important thing is to try to find, is there one that's off?
And that's particularly important if you're going to be racing.
It's particularly important if you're just rowing a boat. I mean, there's no guarantee that any of these boats are set up symmetrically. And they could also be set up so that they're all the same width on one side, but then the wrong width on the other side. And then you're creating all sorts of problems. So getting a tape measure and checking these things is something worth doing.
One boat at a time.
Yes, exactly. So to do that, you need to know the center of the boat. You got to do a little bit of math. You measure the width of the gunwale walls. You divide that number by 2. You put that on the tape measure, and then you find out where the pin is off center. I have a rigging stick, which consolidates the whole process. It has a 0 tape measure that measures out in both directions. So I just got to find the common number between the 2, line it up on the oarlock, and boom, it's all done. Very, very simple and easy to do. But not everybody has a rigging stick. If we want to mess around with this, we can do it
You can have
together.
a workshop.
Yes.
Make a rigging stick.
Yes. Okay, what else is there? So for rigging, we've talked about the oarlock height and how that goes up and down. You pay attention to it if you're rowing in oversized or undersized boats, and that adjusts this. Talked about gearing and how things get heavier or lower. Oh, another thing that affects gearing is the blade shape. If you look at the oars, they all do not have the exact same blade shape. So yes. So the oars that have larger surface areas in general have heavier gears. The oars that have smaller surfaces have lighter gears.
Now that's all relative to the overall length. So if you go take a look at the fatty blades we have down in the boathouse, they all should be shorter overall length than the smoothie twos, which should be longer. But the common thing between them should be the inboard length. So if you take two oars and you stand them up next to each other, you should be able to look at the collars, and they should be the exact same height. All right, and this is important when you're setting up pairs, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You comparing opposite sides to make sure that the collars are the same height is important.
Did you say the fatties were shorter?
They are.
Because the blade is catching.
Because the blade itself is larger,
I never
you don't want to
noticed that.
overload and create a heavier gear. So if you look at them hanging in the rack, look at the distance between the top of the oar and the floor.
Okay.
And you'll see some of them fall to the floor slow, almost touch it, so others don't. The
Okay.
ones that are the longest are the Macon blades. Those are the tulip shapes, the spoons. I personally really like those blades for a number of reasons.
Even for sweep.
Even for sweep and sculling, they give you a lot of feedback in the water and a lot of stuff to play with that you don't get from the hatchets, the asymmetrical blade. But that's a tangent.
You're all channeling the old guys.
Yeah. There's another.
And Boys in the Boat.
Yeah.
Those of us who have rowed in a wooden Nate, yes.
There's another component to the blade shape called hook.
What?
So if you look at the top view of a blade and you see the curve that it makes, it has a certain hook. And that hook is supposed to be proportional to itself moving in the pocket. So as you drive, right, the oar's planted in one location and it moves around that single location. The oar doesn't move through the water. The boat moves through the water and the blade stays in one place. If you had a flat blade, it would interact with the water and have a lot of slippage, and water would go out the sides, and you wouldn't be able to lock the blade in effectively in its place. That curve is also important for the oar length. So if you have a really tight hooking oar, and if you have a really short oar, it's going to work properly. But if you have a really tight hook and a really long oar, it's not going to be able to slide in the water and hold on to the water as nicely. So that comes out in when you put your blade in the water, you pull, you look at the puddle. And sometimes you create more white water or less white water. There's a lot of factors there, not only hook, but hook is one of those components. Different blade shapes have different hooks. Different shapes work towards different power applications also. So we're talking about the fatties. They have a lot of heavy surface area. When they go into the water, they lock themselves in really easily so that when you do apply pressure, it doesn't slip very much. When you have the smoothie 2 shape and you apply pressure, it does have some slippage. Why is slippage good or bad? It's feedback. And this is why I like the Macons. The Macons have the least efficient shape in the water and they have a lot of slippage. So you can play with how much acceleration you have in the boat. So follow me here. If I have slippage and I apply too much power, what am I doing? I'm moving and I'm not moving the boat, right? I can play with that and I can say, all right, I need to put more pressure or less pressure on depending on the hull speed. And that is affected by stroke rate and how much power you have as a crew. So if your boat starts really accelerating very, very fast because you've got lots of fast people there, you may want to have a blade that is larger because you can all hammer it really aggressively. If you have people who are weaker, having a smaller blade
gives you a lot of feedback so that like, wait a minute, I don't need to really hammer this. I can just kind of be more gentle and play with that slippage so that it becomes more of a work together activity as opposed to work against activity. Right? I think we've gone on really, really long.
So slippage is this way.
Is the oar moving without the boat moving is slippage. It's difficult to measure, but you can see it happening when there's white water in the pocket. And you can audibly hear ripping. If it's quiet, you will have almost no slippage. Another way to ensure you don't slip is you dig. So this has been a controversial thing in the world of rowing for a long time now. And the reality is digging creates less slippage, which allows for more propulsion to happen. And because the oar stays in one place when I'm pulling, you're not actually creating a huge amount of drag. So if you dig,
What does dig mean?
Go deep, way deep.
the water surface, there I'm digging more, right? I'm not digging, I'm ripping, I'm washing out, okay? So if you dig, you can plant the oar and you can really accelerate. And if you watch some of the highest level rowers, pretty much across the board, the really fast ones are all digging pretty deep. And
They have such oar control that they're not going to get stuck in that way.
where the problem with digging comes in is releasing the oar out of the water. And if you go back to my previous point of drawing down low, you can bring that berm of water high and just pop the blade out and digging's not a problem. All right, let's call it there.
That was great.
So if you have an adjustable wrench that opens up all the way to 3/4, you'll be able to make sure all the top nuts are tight on all the boats. A 7/16 wrench and a 10mm wrench are the wrenches you need to take the riggers on and off. 3/4 is what you would need to adjust the span. And sometimes you need 13mm or 1/2 inch to do the top nuts on some boats, but it's 7/16 and 10mm are the mandatory ones. An adjustable is very valuable, but not always needed. So as long as one person has an adjustable when you're taking a boat in and out, it's good. And then a screwdriver that has like a Phillips #2 and a flathead is very good. And then an Allen key, I think it's 4mm. A 4mm Allen key is what's needed for a lot of
The wheels.
No, yes on the wheels, and the Filippi boats have a 4mm bolt that you tighten against. So you put the Allen key and then you can wrench it. And when you're tightening it, right? Don't tighten anything more than 2 fingers.
2 fingers.
So ideally, we want to use smaller wrenches, not bigger wrenches. So if you have a really long 7/16, you can very easily over torque the wrench. So
you might hear a crack.
Yeah. I would recommend German Heiko, Wiha wrenches are really nice. They have a very small head.
So you can get into that.
Yes. And the other thing that's really nice is
The torque wrench, right?
the angle that slopes away. So if you get a little nicer wrench, it slopes up at 15 degrees instead of at 9 degrees, which means your knuckles are clear when you're tightening it. All right?
So the reason you want the 7/16 is Vespoli's.
Yes,
So the 10
US boats are 7/16, and
Wintex.
foreign boats are going to be metric at 10mm. If you have a combination 11-10, you can get away with both in one wrench. That's another little trick. All right, let's get it.
Hack.